Lastly, we have Keith Cooley. Keith is a seasoned executive and a proven leader with a highly competitive business, nonprofit, and in the public sectors. I have known Keith for, dare I say,
20 years?
Probably more like
at least 30.
So, yep. Keith, what do you want to tell us?
There's a lot,
yes,
but
sir.
Some of it we'll get out. Just for the moment now, just single mom, homeless at 4 for about a year or so with my mother, but with a real intent to do better that probably was driven from ancestry. My mom's dad, I'm third generation University of Michigan. My mom's dad was 18, 19-year-old Jamaican who lived in Kingston and had not done much more than worked in a pharmacist as a pharmacy mate. Wanted to go to the University of Michigan. Went to Ann Arbor with a forged college diploma. Took the tests, got into med school, graduated as a doctor, and served Atlantic City, New Jersey for 30 years as an MD. I'm not as proud of the illegal way it happened, although it does have a little bit of piracy in it, so it's kind of cool. But more that he was so focused on trying to figure out how to work with people and help people that he was willing to do that. And I'd like to think I'm kind of proud that blood flows in my veins. This idea of privilege, I want you to remember that I know as a male I have certain privileges that many of you here, females, don't have. So this is a mixed bag. My offering a lady a seat on a crowded bus coming from the terminal at San Francisco was met with, "How dare you do that to me? Don't you know that's against the law? I'm just as good as you are. I can stand up. You don't have to pretend like I'm weak." And of course, I didn't mean. My mother taught me to walk on the outside because in the old days they used to throw garbage on people, right? So the men would get it. If you're sitting down and a lady is standing up, offer her a seat. And if you come to a door, open the door for them. Well, that's not the rules anymore necessarily. So please understand, I think it goes for all of us here that while we can talk about the things that have happened to us, we also know the finger points back in some ways in other cases. So for me, it's the normal kind of thing. People meet me and say, "Gee, I talked to you on the phone. I didn't realize you were black." Or being in a restaurant and someone says, "Could you get me another glass of water? Could you get me another drink?" Or I tell people good news and bad news about my car. I have a 22-year-old car. That's the bad news. The good news is it's a Porsche 911. So I've stopped just I think 8 or 9 months ago in Detroit with the car. Policeman pulled me over. Wanted to know why I was driving 50 miles an hour in a 40-mile zone. I wasn't. But my wife is light-skinned. He saw this guy, black guy in a Porsche with a 5-day growth of beard or 3-day growth of beard with a white woman in the car, and he figured better find out what that's all about. I don't get stopped as much anymore, but I get followed a lot. So, I mean, I get it, and I think for me the big thing is just to try to remember that we live in this ecosystem that's full of racial and gender and stereotypes about how things should be, and oftentimes it's more important to remember that people are reacting because they live in this toxic environment as opposed to they're just who they are because they want to be that way. And by the way, the police officer was a black guy. So I started to think that oftentimes people do things, because I've done it, that might seem like a microaggression in spades, but oftentimes comes from this issue of where was I born, who was I, where were you when? When I was a kid, what was expected? Is that the thing you grew up with? And sometimes I wonder if it's not more about intent. When someone says to me, would you please get me another drink? My guess in many cases, there's intent in that. They know I'm not a waiter. I got on a shirt and tie, like everybody, I'm doing whatever I'm sitting. But sometimes people will say things where they don't intend it for it to be bad. And we have to remember where they came from and what their culture expected. With Amanda here, Frida gave her a shake and hugged her and said, "I'm a hugger," you know. And I almost want to say, well, I'm a hugger too, but Andrew Cuomo's just we're not going there. But I do. I hug a lot of people, and I was kind of afraid to. I was afraid to even shake hands, because at Focus Hope, Ish Ahmed accessed the folks there. They said for some women who are part of the Middle East, from the Middle East community, it's expected more that you do this rather than you shake a hand. So a lot of times I just don't know what to do, and I wonder if many of you in the audience feel the same way. Sometimes you just don't know what to do. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
And so my question to anyone who would like to respond is, have you ever had an experience where you tried to bring your whole self to work and it was not received well? And
it's back to the hugging thing. At one point, I was a cabinet member for Governor Granholm. I ran the Department of Labor and Economic Growth. I had a $1.3 billion budget, 3,400 employees in 35 departments, and I decided I was going to get to know everybody while I was there. So in my normal way, I kind of wandered off to every department. I'd give a shake of the hand and a hug to everybody. It didn't matter. Somewhere around, I'm going to guess, 2 months in, my chief staff came in and said, "You're doing okay, except you got to stop hugging." I said, "Why? I don't." This is 2006, by the way, so it's not too far. What, 11, 15 years ago? And said, "There's some people that don't feel comfortable, women mostly, when you hug." It's probably a small group, maybe 3 or 4%, but a couple of people have said something about that. And because I thought, you know, I was showing I was one of them. We're just all people together, but clearly I had screwed it up. So I was trying to bring my whole self to work, and I didn't do a very good job. So I had to back up. I actually sent a note to everyone. I had a thing I called the Minute with the Director, and I sent out a note, and I said, "It's become pretty clear that some of my salutations aren't taken as well as they should be. That's not your fault, that's mine. I will do a better job. I will stop hugging unless you tell me I can, or I will ask you first." And there were some folks that thought that was taken a little too far. Keith, you didn't have to do that, but there were other folks that were pretty thankful that they didn't have to say anything one way or the other. So I learned a lesson, and I continue to learn, and I hope we all have the opportunity to learn and figure out how to do better every time. I've been an advocate for quite a while now of an old saying you've probably heard: when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, which for me has meant if someone says or does something that I'm pretty sure they're doing it because of this, what's on my skin color, I try to gauge whether what I say will have any impact. I've got some folks that actually are still friends, who are probably as racist as we can ever get. We've made a pact that we're going to continue to try to talk with each other rather than at each other, because at some point, those pieces of common ground we had in the beginning that made us friends will grow so that we can get past that. But I'll tell you one quick story. Hopefully it's quick, but it goes back a ways to try to get at the things you were talking about here. I graduated University of Michigan in 1967 with a bachelor's degree in engineering physics, went to work at Knowles Atomic Power Lab at General Electric, and ran a little group called, I was a crew captain for a group that we actually built working nuclear reactors. They were models for the ones that went in the submarines. I came back to school at Michigan, got my master's in nuclear engineering, tried to get a job at Detroit Edison with Fermi, the Fermi atomic. You know, everything was great on paper until I got there for the interview. And I went through the interview, and everybody was really nice, and they smiled. I knew what was going on. When I got back I was working at the University of Michigan. I got back, I did not get a job offer. I didn't even get a letter saying that they wouldn't offer me a job. And I had to ask them, what's going on here? And they said, well, we're just not going to offer you a job at all. At that point, it was clear to me that there wasn't anything more to be said. They knew what they had done. They weren't ready to hear me, so just let it go. I've had other cases where there are times when I thought it was worthwhile talking, though. So just very quickly, I wish the world were a safer place, but it's not. And what you did was the right thing. I think all of us get to a place where we say, I've got to do what my heart tells me to do, almost damn the consequences. But I'm in the middle of doing a study right now on bias. It started out as African-American bias, now we've taken in women and LGBTQ in the auto industry. And how does that, when we transition to the electrified vehicle, how do we make sure workers in those systems get the kind of care and respect that they should get, that they haven't been getting in the past? And what I'm finding right now, the environment we are in right now, post-Trump, and I'll just be very blunt about it, is not one that's safe for people who aren't like folks that were 30 or 40 years ago, where white was the majority and there was a certain way to do things. It's kind of the Wild West in some ways. But I would beg you, please, like you talked about good trouble, I would beg you, please, to be, all of you, I would beg you, please, to be part of that cadre of folks who understand that we have to test and push the boundaries, because this country will not survive unless we can figure out how to put aside these differences that have driven us so much and come together as one people. So thank you for what you did. I know that hurt, the response you got, but I'd ask you to do it again.
Thank you.
I would never suggest to anyone they get up on a 10-meter diving board and jump off, especially if you can't swim. You might want to start by jumping in the shallow end of the pool first and then working your way down till you get to the 1-meter board and then up. And maybe it's the same way here. I'm not about to go, like with Amanda, I'm not about to go up and, is it okay if I give you a hug, or do I have to do this? We'll figure that out later. I've got other friends that I can ask that question of. And as we get to know each other, it becomes more clear that we are safe among each other, then I can begin to make that push. Question, but part of this whole thing for me of engaging around these issues is sort of an acknowledgement of this. You know who Brene Brown is? The acknowledgement of this issue of vulnerability and shame. I was ashamed of who I was for a long, long time, because I was always told if you were this color, that you didn't have much to be proud of. And so I was probably into my 30s before I really realized just how ashamed I was of myself, and then started to begin with talking with people and reading and thinking, and being able to sort of get out of that and just, no, you got nothing to be ashamed about. I'll bet there are people in this room right now who are ashamed of who they are, and there's no reason to be. There's no reason to be. And we have to figure out, with help from others, how to sort of push the issue of shame away and be open, vulnerable to being open to ask a question that we're afraid we won't get the answer we want. Otherwise, it won't start. My first comment would be, number one, you're here, so you got part of that problem solved. 2, listen. Just do some active listening. Just let them do whatever they want to do or however they want to go. They shouldn't touch you, but you should be allowed to listen and hear them out. And then the thing that I continually try to keep in mind for myself is that oftentimes people are reacting because of this crazy environment we're in, racial environment, gender environment, whatever you want to call it, environment that we're in. And so they may say and do things that they don't really mean because it's the heat of the moment. Try to figure out a way to be as gracious as you can without giving in. You still have to be able to say what needs to be said. But that's my take.